Welcome to the topic, growth hacks for global expansion. I'm very, very happy that we're joined by three very, very successful Hong Kong enterprises that have expanded really, really fast globally and really flying the Hong Kong flag. Why don't I give some time for them to introduce themselves? Maybe start with Jess.
Right. Well, I should have a presentation, but it's okay. So we are CHARGESPOT. What we do is actually transnational power bank sharing service. We started in Hong Kong in 2017, and we now have 5,000 stations here in Hong Kong. But then we actually have, let's see, 70,000 across different places around the world, including Japan, Thailand, Taiwan, Singapore, and also Australia. So that is what we do. We want to power possibilities because when you don't have battery or energy on your phone, you cannot do anything nowadays. So we also want to keep people connected and power possibilities so you can do anything you want with your phone when it's needed.
Thanks, Jess. I'm sure a lot of you are like users of Jess product. Over to you, Min.
All right. So, hi everyone. I'm COO at Goodnotes, which is a note-taking app on the iPad. We're very proud to be the most downloaded iPad app globally, more than YouTube and Netflix.
Thanks, Min. Steve, do you want to introduce yourself and the business?
Hey everyone, I'm CEO founder of Sandbox VR. So we do location-based full-body VR experiences. We have one location in Hong Kong in Causeway Bay. We started back in 2017 when Alibaba first funded us when we had our first shop. Now we have 57 locations worldwide. We build our own games and we work with partners like Netflix to bring Squid Game to Sandbox VR.
Thanks, Steve. I think that one of the common kind of traits across all these entrepreneurs are everyone I spoke to who are users of their product love their product, right? And that's not just in Hong Kong, right, but also overseas, right? I think it's quite interesting for these companies to use Hong Kong as a base to expand globally. Maybe let's start with Goodnote, right, Min? We were just chatting backstage, right? You guys do not do any paid marketing, but you guys are everywhere in EMEA and US, and US is one of your biggest market as well. How do you do that? How do you expand the product and the coverage to US and other Western markets without any kind of paid marketing? How do you drive demand?
Yeah, so we're very fortunate to be a product-led growth company. Stephen Chan, our founder and CEO, wrote Goodnotes 1 all by himself in his last semester of college in Australia. And then he put it on the App Store. And that's the beauty and power of the Apple App Store, right? You put your app on the App Store and it gets distributed globally. And then we've just survived the past 14 years, a lot of competition by continually to be really focused on the user experience. And one student just came up to me and before we spoke and told me how much she loves it. She's at CIS, and that's how the word spreads. It's just our users loving the app, telling their friends about it, and then we have tons of influencers, YouTubers, TikTokers, who talk about how they use Goodnotes. And they have millions of followers, billions of views. So on TikTok, for example, we have 2 billion impressions, and that's all organic.
And I'm sure given that you guys have millions of users around the world, right? Different users in different geographies might use the product very differently, right? How do you localize that for them?
So we localize in terms of the language of the app for 15 languages. And then we also have proprietary machine learning models that recognize and synthesize handwriting. So for that, we also have language-specific models. But other than that, the app is a digital paper, right? So there's a lot of scalability in it being paper, because with paper, we don't need to localize that experience, right? We're a canvas for people to write on, and for that, you don't need to localize.
That's really great to hear. Let's switch gears to CHARGESPOT. I'm always very proud to see CHARGESPOT when I go travel in Japan and Taiwan, Australia. A Hong Kong company being such a dominant player in this field in an overseas market is really, really Hong Kongers' pride, right? So like,
Thank you.
to you, Jess, right? There's so many markets that you're entering. What is your go-to-market strategy, and how do you kind of prioritize and rank these markets?
Right. I think for us, it's very important how we find markets that has unmet needs. So we're not really in China because the need is very much fulfilled already. So, but then when we started this business in Hong Kong, we found that there isn't really a mobile charging service that's really mobile. That means you can just take it around with you and return it anywhere you want. So we started in Hong Kong and try to see if it works. And after a few months of testing, we think that it's gonna work. And then that's when we try to go global. So we at that time we had an investor who was half Japanese. So he really has the network there. He knows the market and everything. So it's very easily that we brought the product over to Japan. And so now we can do cross-border rental and return. So meaning if you rent in Hong Kong, you can return in Japan, rent in Japan, return in Taiwan and stuff like that. So I think for every places with a high penetration of mobile phones and smartphones, this service is actually very much needed. And especially when we are relying on our phones very much these days on, writing things, maybe on even on iPad, and making taking photos and also all that kind of stuff. It runs out pretty easily. So the market need itself is very much what we are looking at the very beginning, and also whether we can find a local partner which we can work with very efficiently. Because for local network, for us, it's a very offline product versus the other two speakers today. They're more online of a product, but then for us, it's very much offline. So it's about the locations where we can get that can make our network an extensive one for people to be able to find us very easily. That's very important. So looking for good partners is also very important.
So would you say your number one step in entering a new market is to find local partners?
Yes, I would say so. Because if you just enter the market without any resources of network, then it would be very much of a pain. Because for us, even in Hong Kong, we have 5,000 spots, even for such a small place like Hong Kong. So when you're talking about bigger places like Japan and so on, so you would need a very, very big network for it to be successful. Yeah.
Thank you, Jess. Over to you, Steve. Obviously, Sandbox VR is across the world in a lot of different locations. How do you pick these locations? And when you enter a new kind of market or a new country, what are the factors would you consider?
So for us, cost of growth is very high because we have to open physical retail stores in a new location. So we had to deeply understand kind of like our customer base first, and also uniquely understand what is the strength of our product. So Sandbox VR is a premium product, so we charge pretty high ticket price, but the volume is a little bit low. So when we choose locations, we look at countries that has high GNI, which is growth national income. And then we start with countries with the lowest barrier to entry. That is why when we first started, the first location we expanded outside of Hong Kong is Singapore. And that worked out pretty well. Then the next one was United States. So United States took a lot of resource and investment. And then from there, once we create a footing, then through franchising, we started to expand across Western Europe.
I'm also very curious in terms of like physical location, right? Because like each city would have different types of areas that would be more suitable for your business, right? How would you pick the location within a city?
So for us, we want to be in places where our customers can access within 30 to 45 minutes, which are usually, our customers are millennials. So, like cool places where they can, dine, shop, and most importantly, to socialize. And then we look at landlords that have areas, whether it be shopping mall or, mixed-use neighborhood. And then our strategy is to create a bidding between landlords so we can pick one. And because for us, our business, the cost of rent is very high. So we want to make sure that we get deals that is accretive to our business.
Like these three entrepreneurs make expanding sound very easy, but I know it's actually not. Our business do a lot of business who expand globally as well. So I know expanding globally is always very difficult and with a lot of different types of challenge. So a question for all panelists, right? What is the biggest challenge you guys first kind of experience and overcome as you expand abroad? Maybe start with Jess.
Well, for us, it's definitely the cultural difference. Because when we first started in Hong Kong, we were looking at how people are using it in China. So in China, there are actually a lot of people using the service in restaurants, but they're not really in other places around the city. But then, so when we first started, we thought, F&B should be one of the very popular places for us to place our spots. But then after a while, we found that it's not really the case. So because, I don't know, Hong Kong people are probably too busy going around from one place to another. So actually our most best performing places now are actually convenience stores and also shopping malls. So that's something we have to understand, whether how these people stay in different places, how much time they spend there, what do they do in those places and stuff like that is what we are looking at. So I think understanding locals is very, very different, very important.
And how do you guys overcome that? Do you hire a lot of local teams to talk to local customers?
Yes, I think that is very important for you to have local teams because they know the place very well. They know whether how it's good for us to go to different places, and also they understand how people would use the product in their way that they want to. Yeah, so local teams are very important.
Thanks, Jess. Min, over to you.
Yeah, so for us, as an app, right, we don't have on-the-ground needs. But what we struggle with was being able to explain either declines or massive explosion of growth in certain markets. For example, for a period of time, we were really dropping in Japan in terms of first-time downloads, and we were very curious why. But I'm very happy to say we've recovered that decline. But recently, we've been exploding in Brazil. It's become a top 10 markets for us. And we have no idea why it's exploding in Brazil, right? So just having that local intelligence is really important so that you can at least explain declines and improvements, right? So our solution has been also to hire local teams. When I joined, we didn't have anyone based in 5 of our top 7 markets. We didn't have anyone there. So I've really made a concerted effort over the past 3 years that I've been at Goodnotes to hire locally. So I'm proud to say we now have someone in every of our top 7 markets.
Great to hear. Steve?
Yeah, so early on for us certainly was trust. So we were like a very small startup in Hong Kong, and we had to convince landlords, essentially giving us 3 to 10 year leases, that we're going to be a great tenant, that we won't just run away. That was really hard in the beginning, and it takes a while to build these trust, to meet them, get them to try the product if they could, but also to use data. So one of the things that we've been able to prove while we're in Hong Kong was that we found out that 80% of the people wouldn't have went to that mall if it wasn't for Sandbox, because we drove a lot of foot traffic through online advertisement. And using that data, and especially the data of getting young people to come to our location, was something that we also knew that landlord wanted. So being able to show with data and being present and seeing them really help scale our initial growth. And once you build that initial growth, then you have these landlords kind of be your cheerleaders, for other landlords, and it becomes easier to scale from there.
Thanks, Steve. I think some of you guys talked about hiring local teams, right? And all of you are managing cross-cultural, global kind of companies, right? Hiring local teams is actually quite interesting, right? You want to hire someone who really knows the local contacts, who knows the local market, who have connections local. But at the same time, you want them to be a little bit global so that there's no disconnect with the global headquarters. Have you guys had experiences difficulty managing cross-cultural teams? Yeah.
So we at Goodnotes, we're 300 people now, and we're majority remote. So we have majority of our 300 in 40 countries. So you can imagine that's with such a distributed team, you're gonna have a lot of cross-cultural challenges, right? You're gonna have cultural differences in terms of communication styles, expectations for even when you reply to a message, right? How long can you wait until you're late in replying? So you have all sorts of cultural differences. And it does take cultural savviness, cultural intelligence to be able to manage such a team. And we need to find managers who are versed in cultural intelligence so that they can accommodate for these cultural differences. But often if we're hiring an engineer, it matters less where they are, right? But if we're hiring local talent for marketing, for example, then they do need to have that deep local knowledge while being able to connect with a global team. That means we can't hire someone who's not truly local, right? So you may have a returnee, let's say from the US to a place like Korea, but they've never lived in Korea before. And that cannot be a good local marketer, even if they're based in Korea, just because they don't have that deep local knowledge. So we are always, it's very hard for us because we can't hire someone who is only local and with no global exposure, as you said, because then they cannot connect with a global team and they don't have high enough of English proficiency, right? So finding that balance is really hard, but we're always going to be biased more towards that local intelligence because that's what we're hiring them for. So they need to be a true native speaker with deep knowledge of the local culture.
Thanks, Min. Steve and Jess, any insights on this, managing cross-cultural teams?
Yeah, so we have team across Canada, UK, Germany, Hong Kong, US. We also have teams where we have engineers, retail staff, and content folks. So it's pretty diverse. I mean, our messaging is the bigger the team, the simpler the message. So we try to define what are 2 or 3 things that we really care about as a company. So for us, we really admire someone that is very egoless, very open-minded, and number 2 is an underdog. So when we hire people, we tell them that's what we look for. Every time we have all hands meeting, that's what we always emphasize. We celebrate wins when people show those characteristics. So we understand that with every culture, you have to give them breathing room. But as long as you can unite people within these 2 or 3 main culture of the company, that's all that matters.
And Jess,
Right.
Japan, Australia, obviously
Yeah.
very, very different culture.
Right. I think for us, it was like 3 steps. One is how you respect the difference. Second one is how you rework the workflow. And then the third one to find a balance out of it. So I think, for example, when we were working with the Japan team, Japanese are known for being very detail-minded, very careful about making a decision and, going through a long process before taking an action and stuff. But then Hong Kong people are so flexible. We always talk about speed. We just don't really care about the consequence. We just want to go first and give it a try kind of, attitude. So there was a case where we need to send a machine down to a shooting venue in Japan. It was initiated by the Hong Kong side, and then we were talking to the Japan team, and they were like, oh, you need to fill in a form, and then we need to allow 30 days for it to deliver that and stuff like that. And we were like, what? Like, you can just simply bring it with you and just go right down there, right? So that's something we have to understand because they have a process for doing things. So what we do is we really get to know what the process is about, how we can speed it up, and then we could, find a balance point to see, but can we do it in 10 days instead of, 30 and stuff like that. So I think it's respecting how they do things, but not just put it in your own way. It's what you can do better with them as well.
Cool. Last 2 questions for me. Number 1 is, if you go back in time, like what would you do differently when you think about scaling globally?
Yeah,
Yeah, for us, definitely being a lot more careful on how we select locations. Again, because for us, the cost of growth is very high. I think in the beginning, when you started to grow, it's very easy to get the easy wins. But once you look broader across the market, we were not as disciplined on figuring out why we were winning in those markets. It took a couple mistakes for us to realize that these are the things that are very important. And from there, we were able to build a playbook. If I were to redo it, I would create a lot more discipline from the start.
Discipline is very important.
Yeah, for us, I think as I said before, to have more local folks on the ground in our top markets as soon as possible, just so that we have that local intelligence, that local representatives, ambassadors on the ground. As an app, we don't necessarily need that, right? but I think it's hugely beneficial to have boots on the ground in top markets, even if you don't necessarily need that to run your company.
And I think for us is really to talk to the local teams more often to understand different needs from across different markets, because there are some times that we do modification to our products, and then it may work with one place but not the other. But then most of the time when we were just want to get things done, we would neglect that a lot. So I think to really get everybody to involved in the discussion process is what we should have done much more.
Cool. We only have 2 minutes left, but I want to ask a very important question about Hong Kong. You guys all started in Hong Kong. Like, Hong Kong is a very important base. How would entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, how should they leverage Hong Kong as a base to expand globally? Since we only have 2 minutes left, and this is a question of Hong Kong, so they probably can't cut us out short. So elaborate.
I mean, for us, use it as an R&D center. I mean, Hong Kong has Western taste. Hong Kong has mainland taste. Find your audience, figure out what works, and then once you kind of build your conviction, then you can take flight and go to where you think you can have the biggest success.
For us, Hong Kong has a lot of really good untapped engineering resource, as Steve was just saying, and we've become quite well known for having a really high bar for engineering. So for us, it's a great place for us to attract great engineering talent.
And for us, it's actually a very good trial market, because we all discussed about this backstage, meaning like you can definitely do Hong Kong, but then Hong Kong would not be the end of your business. You have to go worldwide where you have a bigger market. So Hong Kong is more like a trial market because of its very dense property and population, and also it's pretty small in a way. So for all the ideas, it can very easily be carried out and tested out. And it's also very close to, other APAC markets. So I think as a hub, it works very well in that way.
Cool. Thank you so much. Please join me in thanking all 3 panelists for their amazing insights. Definitely, Hong Kong as a hub, we could use Hong Kong to expand globally. So thank you.
A round of applause once again, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much.